Hey everybody, and welcome to our first Fireside chat. To everyone, I can see you, Verena, Anne-Sophie, Mariana, Andreas, Saski. Thank you all for joining. Gloria, Mihai, Michael, Frank. It's amazing to have you all. We have over 50 people in this conversation. Just so you know what you're signing up for the next about 30 minutes. I've got a gentleman joining us all from London who has an incredible background, but specifically he's going to be talking about AI and how they're using AI and big data to do trend forecasting. So if that is of interest to you, please, we'd love to have you talking in the comment section. I've got a couple questions over here, but I want your questions. And I know Kishan does as well. So let me give you a quick background about Kishan. He failed computer science in university, but now runs an AI company. I love the irony of that. He's been in the food tech space for over a decade, but cannot cook. Not that the two have to be connected. The cannot cook is not what I'm saying. That's what he says. He confesses that his wife tells him. But he does love to eat, and so do I as well. This guy is not to be messed around with because he's been the CEO of Just Eat in Bangalore, raised over £1 million, pounds actually, in education initiatives for Uganda and India, has founded multiple companies, and is now the co-founder and CEO of Spoonshot. Please welcome to the screen, Kishan. Come join me.
Hey, hi Dan. Thanks for that lovely introduction, and hello
everyone. It's so good to have you here, and thank you for joining us. I know some people may be aware of Spoonshot. I know others may not, but let's start with that whole startup approach of what was the problem? What's broken? What made you go, you know what? I got to do something about this. Can you tell us a little bit about what's broken in this whole food and beverage innovation space?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So let's take a step back and talk about, what's going on, the realities of food and beverage innovation in terms of commercial and practicality. So anywhere between 50% and 80% of new product launches fail, meaning that the product is discontinued within 6 months of its launch. And that's typically after a very long development cycle, anywhere between 9, 12 months all the way up to 24 months. And so you think about that and you're just like, that's really slow and really bad news after all the investment that's gone in. And if you think about the parallel with the startup world, we're often told, one of the mantras in the startup world is, if you're going to fail, fail fast. Well, yes. FMCG companies often fail, and they do it very slowly. So that's sort of a double whammy right there. And then if you look at the largest companies over the last decade in the food and beverage space, they're seeing their market shares decline, and they've only managed to maintain revenues through pricing and quantity changes. And that's, of course, not a sustainable option long term for them. And then they have these giant, in the case of the giants themselves, they have these huge R&D functions, but they often outsource innovation through acquisitions of emerging and challenger brands, which also doesn't make any sense because it doesn't address necessarily the underlying issues, which is a kind of a lack of agility and the culture of risk aversion. And just to give you a kind of comparison on that point, if you look at the food giants as an industry, they typically spend 1% to 2% of their revenue on R&D activities. Compare that to the Facebook, Apple, Googles, Amazons of the world, who spend anywhere between 10 and 15, maybe more % of their revenue on R&D. And I think, you're seeing the translation of that in terms of their dominance today and what's happening with the decline in some of the larger brands. So, specifically with regard to kind of this point around agility, food and beverage companies have really been slow to kind of adopt technology and sort of the digital evolution. And if you zoom in further into how innovation decisions are made today, more than 90% of all product development that happens in the world today regarding food is based majorly upon internal data, insider data, and that generally is in the form of sales data, which is of course, important data source, but it's far from the only one. And of course, it's backward looking, it's historical, so not necessarily the ideal source of data either. And then you go and look at who's powering these insights, and you look at traditional consumer and market innovation or research companies, and their methodologies have been pretty much the same for decades now, and they've never really truly evolved to reflect the digital reality of our lives today, and they've not really embraced sort of new age technologies that can give them kind of the ability to deliver richer insights. So that's kind of at the top end of the sort of the larger companies and the problems they face. And then if you look at the other end of the spectrum, mid-market, small, medium businesses, challenger brands and startups, of course, they're using Google and Google Trends and other free tools to kind of do their innovation research. And of course, Google is amazing at search, but it's not designed for research. And that's the key point, right? And it's certainly not designed for industry-specific insights. So, of course, I understand the reason why smaller companies use these services, because until now, legacy market research companies have priced them out of the market. They just don't have the financial resources to obviously make the investment in that kind of data or those insights. But of course, that was a key thing for Spoonshot to be able to become a genuine option for even the emerging brands as well as a great value alternative. So yeah, that's kind of, there's a range of problems all the way from strategic all the way down to sort of the granular options that they use today, including things like obviously, the focus groups and the diaries that have been traditional methodologies. They need kind of upgrading. They have a role to play, of course, they're still important, but not in isolation or not in silo.
Okay. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the landscape of how these insights are currently being gathered. So then the big question is, what are you doing differently? What is Spoonshot doing that is giving that next level of insights, that higher order of insights that currently is not available in this industry?
Sure. There's a couple of different things, actually. I mean, we kind of embrace really two worlds. One is artificial intelligence and the other is food science. And we combine them together to kind of give a richer picture of the future of food and sort of tomorrow's consumer needs. And that's the one key difference right there in itself. Like, our insights are by nature and by design forward-looking, and we employ things like machine learning models, which is a subset of a technique in artificial intelligence, to predict trends. And because it's an AI approach, there's a direct implication there that we're using huge volumes of data, because that's what's needed in order for these types of algorithms to work. They don't work off tiny data sets or anything like that. They need to be fed and trained on huge data sets. So it's important, very important, when you're applying any AI model to any use case in the food industry or outside of that in any situation, it's really important that you have the right data strategy. And I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase kind of garbage in, garbage out. And Spoonshot's data strategy specifically kind of processes open, public domain, long-tail data sources. Long-tail meaning not necessarily the mainstream sources, not necessarily aggregated sources. And we kind of look at more than 27,000 data sources specifically, and that can be everything from chef forums where expert conversations are going on to scientific research papers, which are detailing sort of new food processing technologies, to local bloggers writing about, the food developments that are happening specifically in their community. And that's important for trends, because trends are born very locally. And then kind of another huge difference is that the technology-led approach means that our insights are always on. It's near real time. It's a click of a button. It's on demand. And if you think about that in comparison to traditional market research and the way it's delivered, it's kind of slow, it's project-based, it's the delivery of a PowerPoint presentation. And the irony is that as soon as you deliver that PowerPoint presentation or create that PowerPoint presentation, it's already stale, it's already out of date, because, the world of data is just so fast-paced and so dynamic today. And then on the food science side specifically, we, of course, develop domain-specific data sets. For example, things like the chemical compounds of ingredients or nutritional data or certain elements of sensory science to train our algorithms and to understand this expert domain. And in fact, despite we don't make any food, of course, we're a technology and insights company, but we have food scientists in-house who collaborate closely with our data scientists to kind of achieve this expert knowledge. And it's the application of food science in solving the prediction of the future of food. That's what enables us to kind of develop what we call unintuitive insights, or as you said, higher order insights.
Now I want to ask you about higher order insights. I want to ask you about how the heck do you deal with trillions of data set? I don't get it. This is so big, it's mind-boggling. But if it's okay with you, Kishan, I also want to put you on the test, put you to the test, because you said at the tip of your fingertips, like you can find out these insights right away. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to play a game in a little bit, and I want to invite the audience to get involved in this game. Essentially, I want you to tell us if the trends are going up or going down when it comes to certain things. So, for example, Coke Zero or cloves or plant-based desserts. So I'm going to give you a bunch of these, and you got to tell us what's happening. Trends going up, or trends going down. But also, I invite the people who are watching right now, right? So I can see you. I know you can see us. So if you, in the comment section, can put a few items that you are curious, what would Spoonshot say about that trend? Would it be on the up or on the down? All right. So while we have Kishan here, we might as well tap into his amazing wealth of insights and knowledge here. So put that in the comment section. Also, if you have got questions, I know Kishan will be happy to take them. So put that also in the comment section. All right. So let's deal with this huge world of AI. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone claims to have AI. How do you deal with trillion? Like, is this something you can talk about here? Can you explain to a dummy like myself how you deal with such vast amounts of big data?
Yeah, we'll definitely try. I consider myself a dummy too, having obviously failed computer science at university, but I will definitely lean upon everything that my co-founder and CTO has helped me understand over this domain in the last 5 years. But, at the end of the day, this is a complex data science problem. And our specific approach is, of course, to analyze tens of thousands of different data sources. And that adds sort of numerous levels of complexity on top of sort of just trying to analyze a few different data sources. And when you're dealing with big data, it's often talked about in the context of the 4 V's: volume, velocity, variety, veracity. And we at Spoonshot have added a 5th, which is value. It's really important to kind of get economic ROI on any kind of data application or AI application that you're building. And so I'll kind of walk you through this in a little bit of a step-by-step process, as non-technically as I can. But as I said earlier, for AI techniques to fundamentally work, of course, you have to have huge volumes of data. And we don't have any shortage of that. When you think about our data strategy or any data strategy that leverages the public domain data, it's just ginormous. And I think there was a stat several years ago from someone at IBM who said something like 90% of all data ever created was produced in the last few years, which is kind of mind-blowing. And I'm guessing that's just continuing to exponentially be the case. So lost you in that regard.
Oops. There we go. You're back. We lost you for a second, but you're back, Kishan. Please keep going.
Okay. Where did you lose me? Sorry.
We literally just lost one word, so just keep going.
Okay. Sure. So yeah, it's mind-blowing how much data is there in the public domain and can be tapped into. And of course, that data is what we call unstructured. It's obviously unorganized and unstructured, and when you have to try and process it and make sense of it, and you have to do that using a variety of AI techniques, things like NLP, machine learning, of course, computer vision, depending on the nature of the data. So this is about the variety of data. Is it text-based? Is it image-based? Is it video? All these different formats of data require different models to be able to make sense of that data and structure it. And of course, you can structure data and you can enrich data. So if you take, for example, a menu on a website has typically anywhere between 10 and 15 different attributes. But because we've developed domain knowledge, which is sort of that level, sort of more granular level, we can take a recipe and enrich it by an additional sort of 10 to 15 attributes. You can go all the way up to 30 attributes for a recipe, and from that you can build even more connections. So that's an example of how we take that sort of different data and we have to then structure it. And when it comes out to the next stage, after it's been processed and structured, you can theoretically, an analyst or anyone can query that data and sort of ask a question top down. Here's a question, here's an answer. And that's interesting and that's valuable. But of course, for it to be really powerful, what you want to do is surface insights from a bottom-up perspective. So what answers can be provided to questions I didn't even think to ask is really how we think about insights. And because we then add that sort of secret sauce, domain data, food science knowledge, chemistry, ingredients, nutritional information, all that kind of stuff, then of course you can connect the dots, connect these databases, these structured databases in interesting and higher order insights kind of are a result of that. And then you have your core AI system. In our case, our core AI system is called the food brain, and you can tap into that AI system to apply it to various problem statements in the food and beverage domain, beyond even innovation, but it can be used for the personalization of food. It can be used for menu innovation. It can be used for, deep, in-depth studies and research and problem statements. So there's a whole set of applications. Of course, in our case, it's powering the innovation research platform that we have. So that's kind of hopefully giving you sort of a high level understanding of how we go from sort of public domain data all the way through to producing insights.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel certainly more informed. I'm curious, though, for our audience, if they caught the 5 Vs. I'm still on that piece about, I know velocity was one of those, and I know the 5th V that you added. So here's a quick pop quiz for people in the comment section. Did you catch Kishan's 5 Vs? Would love to know. Now, I know we've got a lot of comments here. We're kind of halfway through our time. Why don't we play a little game, Kishan, right? Mm-hmm. So let's see. I'm going to give you a couple things, and you tell me if the trends are going up or the trends are going down. I've got a list over here, but if you take a look in the comment section, we see a few people have added a few things, like maybe sprouted seeds. Michael says chickpea food. Verena wants to know about dairy-based products. Anna, plants. Yeah, so we've got a few things here. What about fermentation is what someone said. So maybe you can take a look at some of those. Yeah. But first, I'm going to start with the ones that I've got on the list. You got to tell me, no explanation, okay? Just up or down. All right. Don't have to justify it. Just go up or down. So here we go. Quick fire round. On your marks, get set, go. Coke Zero.
Up.
Yes. Avocado.
Down.
Oh. Breadfruit.
Up.
All right. Cauliflower.
Up.
Okay. Cloves.
Up.
Plant-based desserts.
Up.
Dine-in restaurants.
Controversial, but I might say down.
No, come on. I'm tired of eating by myself. What about some of the things that people have over here? Do you want to take any of those comments and give us some thoughts?
Dairy-based products, that's an interesting one. Dairy-based products, of course, dairy is under an assault from sort of non-dairy and plant-based alternatives. You know, it's still a humongous market, humongous industry. I think, you know, they've got to learn to adapt. So my answer is up, down. I think, you know, long term, it's a down because of the long-term sustainability requirements around this. But I think they're slowly adapting and they're like embracing non-dairy in the way, for example, they're embracing blended products where you've got both dairy alternatives being combined with the traditional dairy products and sort of keeping both in mind for consumers. But yeah, probably down long term.
Okay.
And you've got plant-based, everything is going up. So I can't see a section of plant-based that is not going up. Fermentation, yeah, it's going to be huge. Everybody's looking at fermentation this year. It's been already kind of the hot topic of the year, even though we're only in January. So definitely up. Sprouted seeds, I might have to think about that one. I'm not sure. Chickpea, huge. It's going to be huge. We predicted chickpea garbanzo back in 2019 in our trend predictions report, and it's turning. I mean, it was huge last year. It's going to be even bigger this year. So, yeah, definitely some really cool ones there, and I might reply to some of these a little bit later as well.
Hard seltzer is something that I think Jonas asked about.
Up.
Up? That's good because
maybe that's a personal one.
He's a co-founder of Pure Hard Cider. I just see that now.
Yeah, I hope I didn't say anything that's going to affect anybody's business or like, you know. But feel free to message me afterwards, and happy to give you my explanation on some of those.
Super. Here's just another quick one because I'm curious. Not necessarily from McDonald's, but what's going on with fast food chains? Yeah,
fast food chains. Interesting. I mean, if you're talking about the established markets, then of course they're having to stay relevant as they always have had, and they've had to adapt and adopt to what's going on in the market. Of course, you've seen things like all of major fast food chains have gone with Beyond Meat as an example, leveraging that plant-based meat alternative, or Impossible Foods burger, or whatever. All these things have been happening, so they're trying to stay relevant. I think that's the key, and they're having to. But if you're talking about fast food outside of the big guys, then there's some really interesting things happening in terms of, you know, in particular in the UK, there are some brands that are really rocketing that are like vegan burger brands specifically. I think one's called WTF in the UK as an example, I think. So yeah, they're having to stay, they're kind of adapting. I think, you know, everyone wants, I can't imagine too many people don't want a burger at some point in time. It's just one of those things that we kind of associate to good times or good feelings. And I think the evolution of the burger is happening, and to stay relevant to our current needs, but it's always going to be there.
Okay. I know you talked about your prediction for chickpea. Was that what we're talking about? And
Yeah.
Can you give us maybe another example of how higher order insights work, how your AI works when it comes to predicting some of these trends?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think brands come to us usually for kind of in four areas to kind of get a combination of these kinds of four areas, and then I'll kind of give an example of one. So I think one is, of course, understanding emerging consumer needs, the whys and the hows. Secondly, is sort of predicting food and beverage trends specifically. Is it a fad? How fast is it growing? What stage is it at? What are the drivers? What are the implications? Third is like, what are the strategic innovation opportunities? What is the white space? What's the size of the prize? What's the current landscape? All that kind of stuff. And fourthly, and perhaps really interestingly, we can generate instantly on-trend, scientifically valid product concepts. So you don't even have to think about that anymore. I mean, of course, we have to formulate it, but we can give you the high-level view on what your product, the hero ingredient should be, what should be the claims on pack, all that kind of stuff. So those are the four key areas. But my favorite example, perhaps, of an interesting insight, and it's because it's kind of, most people might be able to relate to this. So it was one of the first that we developed, first piece of insight we developed when Spoonshot was born, and we were in the R&D phase of our own technology. And just everybody knows, I'm sure, Nutella, of course, a well-established, huge brand globally, well-penetrated. But if you look at the dominant ingredients of Nutella, a couple of them, for example, hazelnut and cocoa, if you look at using food science domain knowledge, if you look at the chemical compounds of some of those dominant ingredients, and then you see where there's sort of a high overlap with other ingredients where they share a similar number or a high number of chemical compounds, you might find what we found is that soy sauce is near the top of that list. And now when you think Nutella and soy sauce, now hopefully most people are kind of, that's kind of a unusual or bold combination.
Right.
But when you kind of look at the data behind that, beyond the scientific data, but even the kind of public domain data, what we found as an example were there were certain regions of the world which were experimenting sort of organically with that combination in a noodle recipe, for example. So Nutella, soy sauce in a noodle recipe at lunch or dinner as an occasion. And then when you think about the implication of that for Nutella as a company, or Ferrero, which is the parent company, it's taking a product which is historically and fundamentally associated with breakfast and snack time, which is usually eaten with bread or croissant, and it's taking it to a whole new occasion in a whole new format. And that kind of is an really interesting insight in itself. So we kind of connected the dots there, and we even tried the recipe in her office, Nutella and soy sauce. I think it was a 3-to-1 ratio, and it was really nice. And since actually, we feel free to go home and well, you're already at home probably, and experiment with that. But that's one of my favorite kind of insights that can be produced as a simplistic example. Hopefully you can all relate to that.
I've got to try that now. And we're in a beautiful place to do exactly that. So I'm going to get some Nutella, some soy sauce, and see what we cook up. I see a couple questions here. Jorg has a question about microfarms and market gardens. And regenerative farming. Do you have any thoughts on that? Any insights?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think anything that's, there's agriculture and agriculture technology is like become a hotbed of innovation over the last, 2-3 years in particular. It's kind of skyrocketed. Investment into anything related to agriculture is literally, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it must be, some triple-digit percentage growth of investment. And things like, regenerative agriculture, microfarming, vertical farming, all these things are getting a ton of investment. I think the key is that the ROI is shown on those investments, and we see that become something that provides a genuine alternative to traditional agriculture, traditional farming. Of course, nobody disagrees with the problem that they're trying to solve, but the question is, can it be done at a scale? But of course, some of these things like sort of microfarming tap into things like circular economy trend as well, which is relevant. So it's all about sort of, and especially in a post-COVID world, there's that kind of localized need for things. It's not like globalization has a different definition today than it did, obviously, 12, 15 months ago. And so, yeah, they're definitely tapping into some of the macroeconomic and sort of social trends. But I think it's important that they become viable alternative economically and in terms of solving the core issue of, the fact that the food security, the demand for global food levels over the next 20, 30 years is growing phenomenally, and current agricultural methods can't sustain that.
I've got one last question for you, but I'm curious what our audience thinks, right? So you've made a case for data and AI being how we best predict food innovation. But I'm sure some people are like, no, Pinterest. I mean, I think it's more art. I think art is what is going to drive it. So let's do a quick poll with our audience over here. Maybe Leon can help with that. But the poll, essentially, I want to know, when it comes to food innovation, food and beverage innovation, are we thinking that it's art or is it science? All right. So we're going to create that. But while we're putting that up, what I'd love to know, because we've only got a few minutes left, large mega trends in the space. Can you give us maybe 2 or 3, a handful of things that everyone should be watching out for? And then again, audience, when you see the poll pop up, let's fill it in and see if Kishan's been convincing that Spoonshot's got the best, is the best methodology, that is more of a science than an art. But yes, please tell us, Kishan, what are some things that we should be watching out for, trends moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of 3 come to mind. One, I'll just quickly name them and then explain each one. Upcycled food and drink is the first. Clean alternative protein, and then the third one is sustainable packaging. I think those are the 3. So I'll just dive into each one a little bit. So upcycled food and drink, I think sustainability obviously is becoming more and more important than ever, sort of pandemic aside. We expect to see sort of interest in upcycled foods kind of help bring down or eliminate food waste growing massively. We're seeing that already in the data. Products that were once considered waste byproducts of food processing are going to find sort of renewed life as either functional ingredients in different formats, like including beverages. So I think interest in upcycled food, if I remember correctly, is like 150+% growth over the last 12, 18 months. And the increase will just continue this year. And interestingly, an association has now been sort of formalized for the upcycle food industry, if you will, and it has its own formal definition now, and you can be upcycle food certified. So I think that's a really interesting thing. And there's going to be sort of things around the ingredients of like peels or avocado pits. So yeah, that's one. The second is the clean alternative protein. I think what we're seeing in the data that's interesting there is that, this area has grown 600% in the last 2 years. Companies that have offered plant-based meat, as an example, have done incredibly well, of course, because of that trend and the consumer interest around it. But, when you look at some of the data behind it, so for example, plant-based protein has not been able to guarantee the clean aspects of their products, right? So the average number of ingredients in plant-based products is 60% higher than meat products. And this could put off consumers as an alternative protein becomes more and more commonplace. And I think only 1% of plant-based proteins today have a clean certification. So that's the second one. And the third one on sustainable packaging, obviously the issue of plastic, major issue. This was before the crisis unfolded. Of course, the pandemic took a bit of attention away from that. But interest has still nearly doubled between 2018 and 19, I think. And that doesn't mean to say companies aren't looking for a solution just because the pandemic has sort of taken over. Over the last few months, I think we've seen some high-profile brands launch biodegradable packaging, which moves away from practice from plastic. So Bacardi has done biodegradable bottle made from natural oils, which are sort of derived from seeds like canola and soy. So there's really interesting things happening in this space. Seaweed, coffee grounds, sugarcane. These are other sort of ingredients that could play a role in sustainable packaging.
Awesome. Kishan, this is so many amazing insights. And some of these we're actually picking up on. We actually have a whole panel on sustainable packaging happening later today, this afternoon. And our next one's actually about cell-based versus plant-based. What's the direction that we're going on? So thank you for, again, bringing a lot of great insights. We did a poll, and I don't know if you saw the results there, but 75% said food innovation is a science more than an art. But I like Frank's response. It's the last comment that's here. And he says, may I suggest a combination? Developing it as a science, but bringing it to the consumer is an art to make it viable. I think it's a diplomatic answer, but I also think it's so apt. So Thank you, Kishan, for joining us. And for those wondering where to go, I know Malta's got a German stream going on right now. And like I said, in about 5 minutes, we're going to be talking about plant-based or cell-based. What is the future? So, Kishan, thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day out in London.
Thanks very much. It's been